And this is what it's all about out here. Imagine you're standing in a field and you find a couple cigars with a piece of paper wrapped around it. And you open up that piece of paper and you realize you have the orders of a general officer in your hands from the enemy. That moment, that very moment, could very well change the outcome of this war. And we're going to talk about that on our video here at Antietam. That's right, here at Antietam indeed. That was from an earlier trip about a week or two ago. I went out to Antietam, visited all the sites, including the spot where the lost orders apparently were found at the Best Farm, and had generally a good time. And I got a video coming up here pretty soon. Matter of fact, tomorrow, talking about Maryland's contribution during the Battle of Antietam. Today we have Redoubt Productions as a guest on our live stream here. If you haven't been over to his channel, he kind of does some of the same stuff that I do. He goes out there, he finds history, he dabbles in just about a little bit of everything, and he does some pretty good stuff. The filmography, I will have to compliment you on that. I'm a big fan of filmography myself, so your stuff looks pretty good. Welcome to the channel.
Well, I appreciate all the kind remarks, especially because I am highly critical of everything I put out. Everything I put out, I'm like, well, that was crap. That was crappier. I got to do better. Oh, that was even worse. I don't want to look. Don't show me that. But now I'm glad to be on. I'm glad you invited me. It's been a little while since I've been on a history live stream. I used to do live streams every week. The show is called Uncut History, but so much has been going on this summer, 2025. I've focused all my energies into making episodes of Retracing History.
Yeah. Okay. That's very cool. That's very cool. So before we get into the lost orders, orders 191, tell us a little bit about Redoubt Productions and what's going on with that channel.
So I guess the first question would be Redoubt. What is that? That's always throws people off. The term Redoubt is a military term for a small bastion-like fortification. It's usually temporary. They're not long-lasting fortresses. Usually they're earthen walls, maybe some palisade walls in the back to hold up the earth. I decided to use that as my moniker because I would always talk about redoubts to people at the historic site I was at, because we used to be surrounded by redoubts. And then I didn't think the name was going to stick. And after the pandemic, it was still Redoubt Productions. And well, here we are later, and I'm too stubborn to change it. That is my name, and I am sticking to it. But the channel itself, it's a history channel. We live, explore, preserve history one video at a time. Always make the joke that we are a historical bastion for historical preservation, because Redoubt, of course, so it gets the fortification in.
Right.
We do a lot of different types of American history. Predominantly, the videos are very similar to yours and to similar creators like Project Pass, History Underground. We go out to the site, record at the site. I do try to make mine a little more, I just want to say, documentary-esque, where others maybe a little more vlog-esque. I feel a little more comfortable when I can look at the script, kind of downsize it to the bite-size information. I can get very wordy in my live videos. And I'm very inspired by the Greystone Productions from the early 2000s that made shows like Civil War Combat. So that all influences my videos. But we started out talking about just southwestern Pennsylvania history, because that's where I'm from. The past year, we've greatly grown to come include sites from the American Revolution. And recently, we've gotten really into the War of 1812, because I found that's a subject matter that has been greatly untapped with all the history videos on YouTube out there. So working right now on a very important video about the Battle of Lake Erie. So it'll be done someday, sooner than later, ideally. So that's what we do at Redoubt Productions.
Very cool. Yeah, someday sooner than later. There's always a ton of footage laying around that you just haven't gotten into.
40 gigabytes worth on my hard drive currently from the trip we took to Ohio a few weeks ago. Not all of that's related to the Battle of Lake Erie. A lot of that went into our previous videos, but yeah, that was the largest folder I made from one trip yet.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a lot of footage. Yeah, War of 1812 not covered very much. I
No.
mean, not a lot of videos out there about that stuff. It's pretty crazy. And frankly, the Revolutionary War, the vast majority of that stuff is pretty old. So definitely some stuff out there that needs to be covered. And I think between all of our channels, we're gonna have it handled this year. So
But before we continue, do not fret.
yeah,
If those are wondering why is a guy speak about the War of 1812 on this live stream, plenty of American Civil War content, plenty of stuff just about Gettysburg, and
yeah,
we've covered many different aspects of the Antietam campaign. So kind of
very
leads
cool.
into tonight.
That's it. That's it. So yeah, that definitely leads into tonight. So Special Orders 191. We're going to get into that tonight. Now, 191, Robert E. Lee he's at this point where he's trying to restructure and set a plan out for this plan going north. And McClellan on the other side is hearing rumors. He's being told by the president that Lee's army is in one place. He's being told by people in power that Lee's army is in another place. It seems like Lee's army is everywhere. And then all of a sudden, like magic, Special Orders 191 ends up falling into his lap. And now the light bulb goes off. Maybe it was the candle back then, but that candle goes off, and he realizes no wonder why it seems like Lee is everywhere. He has this massive plan in place, and they are making it happen currently right now under my nose. And I really didn't realize that this was all going down. So, 191, what is your take on the fact that it was lost in the first place? How does this even happen?
How does this happen? It's one of the great mysteries of the American Civil War. In preparation for tonight's stream, I'd love to have said I was pouring through books. I had no
Right.
time. So I did the next best thing. I listened to podcasts, and I was
There you go.
listening to, in particular, the Civil War Breakfast Club. They had done a whole
Okay.
episode on Special Orders 191. And something they brought up, this is not an uncommon occurrence. Not in the
Right.
American Civil War, not in 1862. Normally, though, when these orders get lost, it sounds like it's in the heat of action. Somebody's in haste to get moving. And well,
Yeah.
Lee's not too dissimilar. He had set up camp in Frederick, Maryland. I think it was around September 6th. He's
Yeah.
spreading out his forces. And he already starts feeling the pressure from the Army of the Potomac. He finds that
Right.
they're moving faster than he anticipates. So he's packing up shop on September 9th in Frederick. He's writing Special Orders 191, getting it all over the place. Why does this order get lost? It seems to deal with the fact how he divides the army. The orders were intended for D.H. Hill, who had a division in the Army of Northern Virginia at the time. And the problem was we don't have the corps that we're so
Yeah.
used to talking about. It's still the wings.
Right.
And Jackson's wing is what's being sent to Harper's Ferry, while the remainder, a small portion of Longstreet's wing, is going up to be in South Mountain, going toward Boonesboro.
Yeah.
D.H. Hill is getting kind of shuffled back and forth between Longstreet and Jackson's command. So it seems that Lee had to make two orders. The initial order that's going out, and then a second one to either Hill directly or to the wing commanders. I'm not certain too much. So there's a second copy made. And because there's a second copy, that's kind of what gets lost in the shuffle. How did it get lost? It could have just been as simple as somebody was riding and saddle was loose, the satchel was loose, and it fell out. Who really knows?
Right. Right. And I'd actually read somewhere that originally Jackson was the original person that was supposed to be receiving these set of orders, and that a secondary copy was made, and it was sent out to that general officer who wouldn't typically get his own original copy of orders. And so this secondary is floating around out there, and nobody's accounting for where this thing is, and all of a sudden it ends up in this field. And so now you get to the point of, well, how did these Union soldiers come across it? Well, a lot of times these armies are actually camping in similar places where they're at. They're crossing paths and don't even realize it. And they go out into this field, and here these two soldiers are. They think they are the luckiest people in the world. They've just found a couple of cigars.
Yeah, that's the important part. Forget about these special orders, cigars.
Right.
That's their day made.
Yeah. So they unroll these things, and Someone even said that possibly they might have considered actually burning the paper to light the cigars with. And all of a sudden they realize that they have something in their hands that their commanding officer has to know about, and it gets passed up the chain of command. McClellan now has it in his hands, and then he opens mouth and puts foot in mouth almost immediately when he gets those orders in his hands. So McClellan's got these orders in his hands, and he's starting to try to move his army. Now, a lot of rumors are swirling around historically that McClellan doesn't move, or he doesn't move fast enough, or he doesn't take as much time and move his army as long as he should have moved them, many, many miles. What did you read about that yourself?
So I'm going to be upfront. I'm one of the biggest McClellan despisers you will find. I am highly critical of him and most of his actions, maybe too much so. Maybe I'm a bit hyperbolic on it. But that being
Yeah,
said, in the early phase of the Antietam campaign, this is the most aggressive McClellan is in his entire career. He knows this is a second chance at command. He does not want to mess this up again. So he got Lincoln, the rest of the White House on his back, pressuring him. You better do something or else this is it for your career. So
yeah,
even before the orders, he is already moving cavalry across the Potomac into Maryland. He's already kind of pressuring Lee to start this whole idea of dividing the army. So
yeah,
Lee's kind of doing it out of, oh, I'm not expecting McClellan to do this. And then McClellan gets the orders. Now, everybody says McClellan sat on his bum for 24 hours. That is absolutely not what happened.
right.
We don't know when McClellan actually has the orders. It gets a little confusing because the dispatch he sends to Washington is dated 12 m. That could be
Yeah,
12 meridian for 12 in the afternoon,
right,
or it could be 12 midnight. And I'm
right.
believing it's the latter in this case.
Yeah,
I don't think he started moving when he got his, once it got all verified and all cleared. And you have to remember, he has to go up the chain of command. I think people think that these soldiers just walk into McClellan's tent. It
right.
takes hours before it gets up to him. Once he gets it, he probably's like, this is real, right? Yep, it's real. We've authenticated the handwriting. He's from there quickly organizing his army to target Lee and Longstreet, who are up in South Mountain. I think he writes to Lincoln on the night of September 13th, going into the 14th, actually says that, we have possession of the Kentucky Mountains, which is directly east of South Mountain. So it's
Yeah,
very clear McClellan is doing something, but you got an entire, the Union Army is spread out too, not as far as the Confederates, but they're spread out. Now
right.
McClellan has to concentrate them. And he ultimately chooses to concentrate on Lee and Longstreet on South Mountain, which really is only a third of the whole army in North Virginia. But there's a
Yeah,
reason he's doing that. If he's going to try to defeat Lee, he's going to defeat him piecemeal. He's not going to go attack the big force of Jackson. He's going to go after the smaller, the more vulnerable target, which is Lee and Longstreet up in South Mountain. And also, the orders are discovered September 13th. Even if it is 24 hours, which it wasn't, McClellan acted as soon as he could. The Battle of South Mountain is September 14th.
yeah,
He's moving as fast as he can for an army in the mid-19th century. So
exactly.
one of the rare times McClellan is on the ball, for the moment at least.
Well, and I think a lot of the things that come out of that, the reason why people are so critical of it is because of the presidential campaign.
The,
If you take a look at what happened with the presidential campaign when McClellan ran for president, the so-called historian that was writing the story about what happened here, he's starting to talk about 6 miles a day. An army should be able to do at least 12 miles a day. It should be able to do 14 miles a day. McClellan only pushed his army to do 6 miles. They were dragging their feet. And as he's writing this, we're taking this as historical fact. But when he writes this information, it was with the intent and the purpose to ensure that McClellan does not get into the White House. McClellan does not defeat Abraham Lincoln. They want Abraham Lincoln to continue to be the president of the United States. So they're doing everything they can to smear General McClellan to make sure he's not going to win that campaign. And because these men that are so closely tied and related to the fight that happened and the campaign itself, people take it as historical fact coming from their mouth, and it just continues to spread like fire. And then future generations of historians write that same information as if it is a fact without doing any kind of investigative research, and it is just perpetuated throughout history. And now we fast forward to today, and somebody here wrote, "You can't blame McClellan for everything, but you can blame him for mostly everything." I mean, this is what the history books have placed on McClellan the entire time. Um, McClellan gets these orders. He pushes his army as hard as he can. The Battle of South Mountain takes place. And then, if you consider what happened at Harper's Ferry to me is probably the worst possible thing that could have happened for that Union Army at that time. It is far worse than McClellan not following up after Antietam and attacking for that second day. What's your thoughts on Harper's Ferry?
It's really tough to say because I think the argument could be, why doesn't McClellan go and go and reinforce Miles? Well, we call it the Railroad Brigade, and for the record, Miles, we're referring to the general of this Railroad Brigade, the Union forces in Harper's Ferry.
Yeah.
It's not a brigade. It's basically a very small version of what we would call a Union Army Corps later in the conflict. I think he has 12,000 soldiers down there, 12 to 14,000, and they're in this very dense location. They're stuck there on the peninsula made by the confluence, I should say, made by the Shenandoah and the Potomac rivers. Steep mountains every direction.
Right.
Frederick Douglass put it best that Harper's Ferry is a perfect steel trap. Now, granted, he was referring to Harper's Ferry when John Brown raided it, but it still applies for Miles' unfortunate situation. It took time, and it wasn't easy for Jackson, the Confederates, to move in on Harper's Ferry. But once they get on top of all the high ground, there's nothing Miles can do to get out. And McClellan is trying to push his way over South Mountain. He can't come to the relief of Miles until he breaks through South Mountain. And it's one of the moments in history where everything is so shaky. Jackson could have failed in taking Harper's Ferry. I think a lot of people forget that it wasn't surefire. That's the whole point of Special Orders 191, is it's going to be complicated to bring free army, I guess you want to say division size forces for armies, free divisions of the Confederates to move in on either side, because you have to come on different locations of the river. You can't ford it easily down there. There could have been a moment McClellan could have broke through South Mountain earlier if Lee and Longstreet hadn't set up the defenses. It's really tough to say. Miles was in a bad situation. McClellan was trying his darnest to break through, and unfortunately, South Mountain proved to be just ever so slightly too difficult to overcome in a quick amount of time. Yes, the Union get over it after September 14th, but not after a hellacious battle. And Miles, he's looking around like there's nothing I can do.
Right.
And unfortunately, a lot of people call Miles a coward. Some say there's the rumor that he was shot by one of his own men. That's probably not what happened.
Right.
The actual Battle of Harper's Ferry, it isn't much of a battle. It's a lot of maneuvering, some bombardment, and then Miles is like, well, this is either go a very good way or very bad way. And I forget when's if he surrendered before he's mortally wounded, or it was after, when basically the army went, oh, we can't do this anymore. I remember an account that there was so much confusion amongst the Railroad Brigade in Harper's Ferry that as the artillery bombardment's going on and as the Union's trying to surrender, apparently Jackson had to actually get behind Union lines and basically explain what was going on. I've heard it's a rumor, but it was so chaotic that here he got one of the highest ranking Confederate officers essentially going over to the Union artillery batteries up on Bolivar Heights and trying to explain them, no, we're done. The surrender has been made. Your commanding officer is mortally wounded.
Right.
It was that chaotic. So much is going on in such a short breath of time. Anything could have happened.
And if for those of you out there that have not been to Harper's Ferry, it is a beautiful, wonderful place to go visit. The battlefield itself, a lot of positions are still preserved. You can go see it for yourself. I was fortunate enough to get out there and be able to visit while Dennis Fry was out there talking. He tells the story better than anybody when it
Yes.
comes to Harper's Ferry.
I cannot stress enough listening to Mr. Fry speak about Harper's Ferry and the American Civil War. It's one of the best experiences you can get from being a Civil War history buff.
Oh yeah, 100%. So now he's got these orders in hand. Everything's in motion. Everything's rocking and rolling, and then we get to the point to where Antietam is about to happen. I mean, this is the single bloodiest day in combat. Antietam is. That battle cannot be overstated. How terrible the fight was there. In the cornfield alone, we're looking at like some 8 or 9 thousand casualties just in Miller's cornfield, and the type of seesaw action that goes back and forth there as a result of Orders 191 being found. If 191 is not found, McClellan doesn't make the moves that he makes. There's no Battle of Antietam. What say you?
I think Special Orders 191 is definitely been put on this pedestal as one of these almighty moments, like one of these crazy fluke things in history. It's not the only time orders or intelligence was recovered by the enemy. It's not the first nor the last time in the American Civil War alone. I think McClellan would have eventually caught on to what was happening. He was already starting to push on Lee's rear guard in Frederick,
Okay.
Maryland. I think he would have eventually put two and two together that to the west of him is where the Confederates are. That being said, it would have taken a lot more time for McClellan to gather that intelligence. Just feeling like, okay, the Confederates are over the mountains here. Let me go. Okay, there's nobody up in PA actually. Oh, okay, your governor's saying you have hundreds of thousands of Confederates running around, but
Right.
So McClellan probably would have eventually figured out what Lee was doing, but it would have been days, if not a week or so, before he really figured it out. And by then, who knows what American history would have looked like. So by discovering Special Orders 191, everything is kind of extradited.
Right.
Lee's invasion of the North, it has to be thrown out almost immediately. McClellan knows exactly where Lee is for the next couple of days. Lee is forced to pull everybody into that bend on the Potomac River at Sharpsburg, Maryland, and form as best of a defense as he can make to salvage this campaign. And
Yeah.
at that point, we really have to see how September 17th would play out. Everything's in McClellan's hands at that point, going into September 17th.
Right, pretty much. And I think one of the biggest mistakes he makes is basically guaranteeing. You don't the one thing that you learn in life, especially if you're going to be in any kind of leadership position, is if your superior is listening to you talk and you tell your superior, "I got this in the bag. No problem. We're going to come out on top." And you overpromise something and then you can't follow through with that promise. You just pretty much secured your fate right there. I think it was his mouth that really got ahead of everything, because if you look in the future when we're talking about that campaign for presidency, one of the main reasons why people don't want him to win is because of his relationships with other people and the way that he talked to people and how he carried himself as a general. His men loved him, but other people in power and powerful positions did not care for General George McClellan. The president himself probably had a bad taste in his mouth for him, and he liked just about everybody. So um, I really think it was McClellan that defeated McClellan. And when we're talking about Antietam itself, you can't overstate the importance of Antietam. If Antietam is not fought the way that it's fought, if George B. McClellan does not fight there, does not take that stand, does not force his hand and masterfully keep the Confederates from being able to overrun certain positions on that field, then the gates are wide open. McClellan could have retreated in the face of the enemy just like he was redeploying in the face of the enemy at the 7 days battles, but he didn't. He kept his lines intact. And without Antietam actually being Antietam, without that fight, then who knows what happens to history after that.
I think when you look at McClellan, the first half of the Antietam campaign, uncharacteristically aggressive. He is in a do or die situation for himself, for the country. He finds the orders. He acts upon them as quickly as he can. And then we get to the battle lines being formed around Sharpsburg, Maryland.
Yeah.
And then we get even to this day, people are unsure what is really McClellan's strategy on September 17th. It's very murky. One day I will read Hartwing's tome on the Antietam campaign. Tomes, I should say. I'm intimidated, but the answers may be there, and they may be there. But
Yeah.
from what I've seen, from all my experience at Antietam, the way McClellan engages Lee on September 17th is so, it is the opposite of how we should be expecting him to be in that position. He goes from being aggressive, he got Lee where he wants him, and then it's very piecemeal attacks throughout the day that play into Lee's hand to keep reinforcing his Finn battle line. I mean, you can argue the intelligence wasn't there, but I've always wondered, okay, after he's pinned Lee to the Potomac River, why is he still so apprehensive? Why is Lee still the boogeyman to him? I'm like, surely at this point you would figure out somewhat that, oh, Lee's fallen back. I got him pinned. I know, we know what's going on at Harper's Ferry. Maybe it is the loss of Harper's Ferry really makes McClellan weary again. I think that does definitely have an impact. So maybe we're too harsh on him being weary, but I still, look, I'm a guy who's always said that one of the greatest missed opportunities of the Civil War is the Bloody Lane at Antietam. I've always said that. I know why people, because I've had a lot of people say, well, this is why McClellan didn't act upon it. I get the criticism, but at that point, for a very brief moment, I feel McClellan should have pivoted from whatever he was trying to do on the Union right flank that morning. He should have pivoted into, there's an opening here. Your big attack on the Confederate right flank, the Union left flank around Burnside's Bridge, it was taking all day to just get started and go. And this is a mess, a logistic nightmare. Maybe we should be reshuffling to this breach we exploited. Right. I'm probably being too much of an armchair general. That's probably a lot of bias toward me, but McClellan acts unusually aggressive through the capture of Special Orders 191. He gets Lee into the position he needs.
Yeah.
And then he reverts to the McClellan that we know and criticize, and it may be because of Harper's Ferry.
Yeah.
So it's one of them. If things had just changed a few hours earlier to get these information, maybe he could have sent relief to Miles, and that the largest surrender of federal troops during the Civil War would not have happened like that.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. And it really shows you how important Special Orders 191 is and how very fluid these events were throughout history, not just the Civil War.
No, for sure. Oh, and you have to consider the cast that he's working with too. So Hooker has one of his best days ever. He's doing great as a general officer there on that field. Burnside is actually not doing that bad, and he actually puts himself in a position to probably sweep up the entire Confederate army from that side had there not been timing. Had that other unit not come on the field when it did and go into the fight. That you can argue that at that point Lee was looking at a situation where he was about to lose that battle.
And that's a thing you bring up. You're talking about we're talking about the Confederates that come up from Harper's Ferry at the end of the day.
Right.
That brings an interesting point too. Oh, what I was going to say. I was going to say stuff very decent, and then I lost it in the evening, fog. Well, okay. What I was going to say was, how much intelligence does McClellan have about AP Hill coming up? That's a question I want to know. I mean, it's clear that McClellan is definitely gun shy because he knows of that large Confederate presence that was just at Harper's Ferry, which would now, of course, have mostly moved up to Sharpsburg by now. Yeah. So he definitely has this fear that there are some more Confederate forces in the area.
Yeah.
But if you know that they're coming in, wouldn't you want to take advantage before they get up there, smash up the Confederate front line? There's so many what ifs.
No, absolutely. And somehow, some way, the Irish always find themselves in the position to get put in the toughest, roughest part of the fight and get thrown against the brick wall again and again and again without support helping them out. I don't understand it. I really don't. That's it's a whole mess there. McClellan himself, realistically, I think that McClellan probably cared a little bit too much, as harsh as it sounds. He cared a little bit too much for his army, because in order for There was that famous quote where, in order for you to be a good officer or a good general, you have to be willing to put to death the thing that you love the most. And he he did care a lot about his men. And when he put them into the fight, I think that the fight itself affected him more than anything else. Um, and seeing what was going on around him, I think he was more worried about that intelligence that you're talking about, the size of the army, the unknown that's out there, than he was worried about actually attacking and going into the fight and pressing his luck on these situations. In the beginning, in the American Civil War, the very first couple of years there, the people that were the victors were the ones that went on the attack and left it to chance. They were the ones that put it all on the field. And even in a situation like Malvern Hill, Lee didn't really win that battle at Malvern Hill. McClellan won that battle, but Lee still pressed and pushed that fight. And for some reason, McClellan backs off of Malvern Hill. So going forward, we have this whole Sharpsburg Antietam thing happen. And after that battle's over with, obviously it is like the exclamation point for the next political move, the next
Yeah.
move in the war, which is that Emancipation Proclamation. Um, Orders 191 kind of starts the movement in that direction, really, for me. What about you? How important is the Battle of Sharpsburg, the Battle of Antietam, to this emancipation?
Uh, it is definitely it was the best thing Lincoln had to deliver this war measure.
Yeah,
I will say about the Emancipation Proclamation, it's brought up so many times. It is a war measure that Lincoln brings up, another way to cripple the Confederacy. It's
right,
another, again, key words always are in it that he is freeing slaves in states of rebellion. It's
right,
not a whole nationwide emancipation yet. It is the forerunner for the 13th Amendment, of course. That is
of
really
course,
getting the ball rolling.
right,
Unfortunately for Lincoln, he rested on Antietam being this stalemate. Hey, we
yeah,
drove the Confederates out of Union states. That's good enough, right? And at the moment, it was the best thing he had. So he pushes it. Unfortunately, it's going to take a long time for the Emancipation Proclamation to ring true
yeah,
because of what's going to happen at Fredericksburg. Really, the only thing saving the Emancipation Proclamation is the Battle of Stones River. That's going to
yeah,
happen out in Tennessee right before it's about to go into effect. December 30th through January 2nd, 1862-63. That battle does more, I think, to really fortify the emancipation than what Fredericksburg definitely did not do. So
yeah,
it was definitely a risky move that Lincoln made. It almost failed. So
yeah,
I always say about Antietam, we really like saying it's feel good to say the Battle of Antietam, led to the Emancipation Proclamation, and it did technically. But
yeah,
really, for it to have the impact, you're going to need what happens at Stones River going into the winter. And of course, you're going to need another big Union victory, which would be Vicksburg and Gettysburg in 1863,
yeah,
really to anchor in, to really have that turning point settle in. So I feel the Emancipation Proclamation, its impact is a much windier road than we often credit. But
yeah,
Antietam should not be taken out of its conversation.
yeah, of course. I mean, Emancipation Proclamation itself, too. I mean, people need to, like you said, understand that this is it's a proclamation of war. It is to affect the South, and it did affect the South, not necessarily as greatly as they thought it was going to affect those armies, but it did take an effect for sure. Um, One thing that's lost in all of this, when we talk about the Battle of Antietam and the Emancipation Proclamation, and I'm covering this in this video tomorrow that's coming out about Maryland's fight at Antietam.
They
Maryland
have
goes
they have a
into,
beautiful monument, by the way, at Antietam. They have a
oh,
nice
yeah,
on the
yeah,
battlefield.
for sure. So Maryland goes into this fight. They bring their men into the fight, which, by the way, is on both sides. Maryland is fighting for the Confederacy. Maryland is also fighting for the Union Army. Um, in Maryland, in Sharpsburg, there's some 210 people who are free, people of color. There's 150 people in Sharpsburg, Maryland, that are enslaved. These people that are fighting for the Union in that army, that a lot of historians like to talk about as being the army that's specifically and solely for the freedom of enslaved people. Part of that army is coming from states that are actually enslaving people. and they are fighting in the Union Army, and they're at Maryland. And to me, the irony, it's kind of lost, really. The irony that these men from Maryland are there fighting one of the biggest battles ever, and their own state is still enslaving people.
They have a very cool exhibit. Well, the whole new exhibits at the Antietam Visitor Center are phenomenal, but they have a really good one that hammered home to me. They break down the politics of the Sharpsburg area.
Yeah.
They didn't elect Lincoln by majority. They didn't elect Douglas or Breckinridge. They went for Bell, who was with the Constitutional Union Party, which almost gets no recognition when we talk about the political lead up to the war. It's always about the Democratic Party splitting, which causes the friction to allow the Republican Party to eke out a victory. And we never talk about Bell and the Constitutional Union. Border states like Maryland, they didn't want any involvement in this debate over slavery, partly because they were slave states. They also knew, though, they would geographically end up being the front lines of this war.
Right.
So they're trying their darnest, but please don't do it. Yeah, please don't fight each other. We just let us do our things. Let us be. We don't want to be the front lines. So they don't vote for Lincoln. They don't vote for any of the bigger parties. They vote for this, basically, I want to call it a passive party. It's not what the Constitutional Union was, but basically this status quo party. Just leave us alone. That's what they elected. Obviously, it didn't pan out on the federal stage. And then you have the Battle of Antietam ensue in their backyards. And it only makes you imagine, like, well, what is it like living in these households? You know, you're like trying your best not to fight anymore. You're trying to keep I guess you want to say the elven in the room in the corner and stuff. You're just like, I just want to keep my head down. I just don't want to get involved. And then literally you have two groups of people come over you and just start banging on the back of your neck. And it's like, what do the people of Sharpsburg and the whole region do? How do you respond? Some, they'll enlist with the Union. Some enlist with the Confederates before the battle. After the battle, more will probably join. I'd like to do more research to see what does the Battle of Antietam, how's it impact people living in a slave state like Maryland, and like where does it lead them go? Does it sway them closer to the Confederacy? Does it sway them closer to the Union? Yeah. Do they start changing on their stance of slavery as part of culture in the United States? Yeah. I'd love to do more research on it. It's a very interesting subject matter. And I think it's partly what draws people so much into Antietam beyond the moniker of the bloodiest single day in American history. Yeah. We always talk about Gettysburg, but Antietam is always the second one right after.
Right, exactly. Well, I think government has a lot to do with it there in Maryland. I mean, if you just go to, the fort there in Baltimore and you read the history that fort went under during the American Civil War, or at the outbreak of the American Civil War, how guns were aimed at Baltimore from the fort. Basically, don't even dare go to Civil War because we will turn our guns and we will fire at you in downtown Baltimore. I think the fact that they were sandwiched in between also gave Washington, D.C. and the Federalists, the federal government, that ability to kind of control that situation there a lot better than, say, a state that's 2 states away, a state that's like South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama. Those states are so far removed from that federal government in Washington, D.C. that it's a much easier take for them to be able to band together with those states that are falling off from the Union. Maryland, on the other hand, like you said, it's sandwiched in between there, and they're kind of pulled apart. A real civil war, if you will, other than the actual battles itself. But yeah, it's the legacy of Special Orders 191. It cannot be overstated. There's a lot of rumors out there and things that were passed down through the ages about that. But it's always nice to kind of have these debates and clear the air and talk about these things on. To be fair, much of Baltimore looks like a war zone today. Micah Kaplan said that.
I've yet to beat the Baltimore. I cannot comment.
Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, downtown's pretty rough, but there's the outskirts. The outskirts looks pretty nice. I like the outskirts.
Fort McHenry looks beautiful.
It's beautiful out there, yes. But yeah, I love having these talks, these debates, and having this back and forth, and having you on here. I really appreciate you coming on here. And realistically, these vlogs and these live streams, what it really boils down to is we we have been given one of the greatest principles in the world, and that's the freedom of speech. And I'm really appreciative to have that right as well. So before we close out here, I'm going to give you the last few minutes and kind of tell everybody what you got going on.
Waffles is giving me a microphone. So I guess his microphone's been here the whole time. So what's going on at Redoubt Productions? What can you expect from me in the future? Well, I've already mentioned about the Battle of Lake Erie episode of Retracing History and working diligently to get that up. That'll kind of cap off all of our War of 1812 coverage we've been doing on and off throughout this year. After that, we're planning to head out to Philadelphia. We're going to do some stuff, of course, with the American Revolution, but our main focus, there is a certain warship in the Delaware River, and it is attached to one of my favorite subject matters, the Spanish-American War. One of the reason the United States goes from being a regional power to a global power. It is that war. And that is one of the only major pieces that still survive from it. So I can't wait to go explore the Olympia. I think we're going to go see the USS New Jersey as well while we're out there. So while that coming down, and I'll keep producing videos. I always try to experiment with some different formats. Some of them work, some of them don't. Yeah, it's part of the fun. So if you want to keep following us in our adventures, see what I'm up to, you can go to Redoubt Productions. And with your subscription, you will join a historical bastion for preservation. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the rest of the year. And I'm looking forward to see what everybody else is going to be creating history content-wise for the rest of the year. I know you've been working on stuff. I know History Savior 1941. He keep building stuff that he's working on. With a Project Past, he's in the middle of a great series about Shiloh, which I highly envy. I highly envy his series and how he's able to nicely break down a massive battle into a whole series and make it very digestible. And we'll see what everybody's up to. So thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely, no problem at all. And we'll try to get you back on here again to talk some more history in the future, I'm sure. One last plug out there for everybody. If you haven't heard, the dates for the Gettysburg Film Festival is out now. April 2nd, 3rd, and 4th of 2026. And this year's film festival is going to be on the American Revolution, celebrating the American Revolution and talking about the films surrounding it and the Ken Burns documentary coming out.
That's going to be interesting because we haven't had a lot of American Revolution films, especially not in the past 50 years. Yeah. We had one theatrical depiction. The less said about that, the better. I kid.
Are you talking about The Patriot?
What is The Patriot you speak of? I prefer The Crossing. much. That's the best movie in 2000 about the American Revolution, right? That's the one we're talking about.
Okay. All right. Well, we appreciate you coming on, and I'm looking forward to seeing some good things from you here in the future.
Hopefully I don't disappoint.
You won't. I'm sure of it. Everybody else out there, until we meet again, this is History with Waffles, signing off. I couldn't think of a better place to end this video than right here in the middle of the woods, the Battle of the Wilderness, at the hotly contested Brock and Plank Road, Orange Plank Road. Not too far in that direction, Longstreet's wounded. Right here where I'm at right now is a place where men like Wadsworth and Hayes end up losing their lives. Families lose loved ones. Soldiers burn to death in these fields around me here. If you'll let these fields do it, they'll touch your soul.